Hi guys, Russell Sturgis here with the next in our blog series on stillness. You can see behind me I'm at a beach destination, and this is in Adelaide in South Australia, and in fact this is North Glenelg Beach right on the promenade, and my apartment where I'm staying over this last few days is just a few hundred metres around the corner. I've been here teaching the Aware Health Professional, which has been a series that I've run this year on health professionals becoming aware about how their personal narrative has the ability to impact on how they function as a health professional, and therefore is responsible for the sorts of things that they can have as personal outcomes. And of course, in this regards, I'm talking about things like compassion fatigue, I'm talking about burnout, I'm talking about depression, as all things that are quite possible as a result of people's personal narrative getting in the way of how they function as a healthcare professional. It's been incredibly well received yet again, and this is my last for this year, but look out for next year, because I'll be running another series of these throughout Australia and New Zealand in the new year. And it's limited just to half a dozen or so people. It's a very intimate experience, and one where you really get to explore what sits at the core of your behaviours, your thoughts, your beliefs, and how that impacts in your life. And it's an awareness experience, so what we're doing is having you become more aware of who you are. The impact of awareness, of course, is stillness, and what I've been doing over the last few blogs is trying to give you an idea of what stillness looks like in the different states of consciousness. So far we've talked about physical stillness, we've talked about the stillness as a mental experience, and today I want to just discuss briefly the experience of stillness as an emotional experience. So this whole idea that I've written about in the blog this time is that if we can come to the understanding, and I believe that this is the absolute core to emotional stillness, is that if you can get this one principle, then you can adopt emotional stillness. And this one principle is that there is no intrinsic feeling or emotion knitted into the fabric of any person, experience or object that we encounter in our day-to-day lives. So in other words, what that's saying is that nobody else makes us feel a certain way, or a movie doesn't make us feel a certain way, or a person, or something that we experience. Basically what it's alluding to is that we solicit our own emotions, our own feelings, and project them onto what's going on. Because in fact, you could have two or three people sharing the same experience. It could be the same person, for example, and each of those people come away with a whole different feeling in terms of how they relate. Now, that can only happen as a result of the filters and the way in which they personally perceive who it was that they were encountering, and therefore become responsible for what it is that they're actually feeling or experiencing as it relates to that person. That means then that you have a choice about the feelings and emotions that you project onto a person or an experience or an object. So in other words, you're not a victim of it, you actually get to be in control of that, and so you could choose peace, and stillness is the way in which you relate to certain things. I would go so far as to say that any time that we have an emotional reaction expressed in whatever the feeling is that we get to experience, is that it's actually invariably got nothing to do with now, that in fact it's about our experiences from the past, the things that we've had in the past that are informing how we relate to now. I became very aware of this in my observation of my daughter, my youngest daughter, whose name is Adelaide. Adelaide was born with Williams syndrome, and some of you know her personally and some of you will never met Adelaide. And Adelaide's 26 years old, and she was born with this condition. It's something that she'll have for life, Williams syndrome. It's an anomaly in the calcium and elastin gene, and the impact of it is that it leaves her with intellectual disability. And one of the things that became really evident during the course of her growing up was that she struggled to be able to identify what emotions went with what experiences. And so she spent a lot of time watching very, very closely how people would respond to what they were experiencing. So for example, during the early turn of the century, so between 2000 and 2006, I was involved with as part of the medical team for the Brisbane Bullets in the National Basketball League. And I would sit on the bench, and they very kindly had a seat for her immediately behind the bench. And oftentimes when I'd look around, she wouldn't be watching the game. All of her time would be spent watching how people were reacting to the game so that she could learn how to respond emotionally to what was going on. I also observed at times that when she was presented with profound experiences that solicited what in normal circumstances would have been a strong emotional response, she would stand there unsure about how she would respond to these sort of situations. And with time, she learned that she had some core experiences that created, were so painful that they created an emotional response that she was able to relate to. And so, for example, at a very young age, she lost a pet dog. A dog died that she was very fond of, and there was great sadness for her in the loss of that animal. And so, many years later, if she was presented with a situation that required her to be sad, it was interesting that she would immediately start talking about the dog that she lost. And she would have this as part of her conversation in order to re-encounter the experience of sadness so that she could align that awareness of sadness with what it was that she was meant to be experiencing in the present moment. And of course, what I began to realize was that there were many of these things that she sort of stored up in her memory, which were really, really strong emotional triggers that she would resort to. Now, one of the interesting phenomena of people that have Williams syndrome is that they have a particular penchant for horror movies. It's like they don't want to watch them, but they're drawn to have to see them. And of course, what I've become aware of in understanding this is that what they're getting to experience in watching a horror movie is the sensation of fear. It's so frightening that they actually get to identify the experience of fear. So that what happens is that when they're put into scary situations, they're able to respond or resort to connecting back in with those feelings that were created when they were watching those films, in order to be able to relate to an experience of fear in their present time. So it's kind of an interesting thing to watch somebody with this particular syndrome acting out the things that we do unconsciously. So she has a very conscious approach to this. Yet you and I, and we don't realise that we're doing this, is that we're presented with situations that creates an emotional response. And I can tell you that you're doing exactly the same thing. That what you're doing is going back into the memories of the past and the experiences of the past that solicited those same emotions, that created those same feelings, and you're projecting those particular feelings and emotions onto what's happening now. And so the reality of your response actually has nothing to do with what's going on now. I mean, it does invariably to some extent, but it's being fueled by memories of the past and the things from the past in order for you to have to be able to respond now to those things. The only difference is that in Adelaide's case, she has to go through a very cognitive process of being able to expose those memories and their associated feelings. You don't have to do that because of the maturity of your cognitive process. You can just do it subconsciously, just like you do anything else. It's sort of planted into the subconscious and you're able to access that without even having to think about it. So I want you to think about that as a possibility, that in fact, the things that you're experiencing now may actually have nothing to do with now, but in fact you are referencing emotions from the past and projecting them onto this moment in order to encounter this moment in the way that is familiarly acceptable or societally acceptable, however you've been programmed to believe that you need to respond to these sort of circumstances and situations. I would suggest to you that you can approach any of these situations in a place of stillness. It's not denying what you experience as a human being and the way in which you encounter and respond to certain stimuli in life. It's not denying the things that happen, but it's about understanding that the emotional response and the depth of response is more about your own history and your own story, your own narrative, than it is about what's actually going on in this now. And that in any moment you can choose peace instead of what it is that you're experiencing. Stillness in an emotional state requires us to be aware, totally aware, that no particular experience has an emotion knitted into its fabric. We bring that to the experience, and at the end of the day you can choose. I hope you find this all helpful, something that really helps to give you an expanded understanding of stillness. Next time we're going to be looking at stillness as it relates to who you are spiritually, and I want to just reiterate that in terms of EAP, spiritual relates to what it is that you desire, what brings momentum through desire in your life, what it is that you value, and we're going to be looking at those in our next encounter. Thanks for taking the time to listen. I hope you found this informative and joining me here at North Glenelg. It's a beautiful day here and love being out here and sharing this blog with you here. To find out more about the Enhancers Awareness Program, please go to eapmentor.com, and on Facebook you can find us at Enhancers Awareness Program. And each day we have inspirational stuff on stillness and awareness and mindfulness there that may help you to maintain a consciousness around those things. Anyway, thanks for catching up again, and look forward to speaking to you again. See you later. Bye.